So yeah, I was listening to Fred Davis today, and Fred is a non-dual teacher down in the southern part of the United States, and he's a good old boy. And I love to listen to Fred because he's got a good sense of humor, and he's pretty effective in helping people to wake up. And so one of the things he said today in his little message is he said, you know, I was unborn again. And what he was referring to is the fact that when a baby is born, the unborn is born. And what that means is that there is no birth yet because the baby doesn't have a personality, right? So the one who has the birthdays and the one who has the life and everything doesn't exist yet. You know, there's awareness that has showed up in a body, right? But there's no birth yet. And so it's only when about 2 years old, when language comes into the picture, or maybe a little bit before that, because they say that the baby starts, even before language, the baby starts to recognize separation. You know, that my body is different from what's not my body. When that starts to happen, that's the birth, right? Because before that, there's nothing there. Because all there is there before that is awareness, and awareness is not a thing. There's nothing there before that. And so awareness is aware, and the awareness is using the baby's body and eyes to be in the world, right? But there's no person yet, so that birth has not yet occurred. So this is a mistake that people make. They think that the personality was born when the baby was born. Well, if that was true, how come you have to name it? How come you have to, tell it what it is if it already knows what it is? So that's what he was talking about, the idea of being unborn. And he said, I was unborn again because once the birth takes place, the personality comes into existence, right? Then at some point later in the story, he wakes up and realizes his true nature as the awareness that's always been there, but it was hidden by the idea of being the personality. And so he said, I was unborn again. So that was his way of talking about that. But one of the things that I really want to, when I look at things about what there is that I can say in these talks that would be useful to people, one of the things that came up for me is that it's easy to make the mistake to think that the practice of meditation is what will get you there, is what will have you wake up, what will have the personality be seen for what it is and all the rest of it. And there's a lot of people and a lot of traditions that emphasize that as if that's the case. I don't know if they actually mean it to be so, but it seems so, right? Because, people go to practice, people that get into meditation and believe meditation is very much related to realizing your true nature. So they meditate more, and they go to these extreme retreats like the one I was mentioning to you earlier that Paul Hederman spoke about when I was listening to him today. And he was making an interesting point. He was saying that, he went to these extreme retreats in Thailand where they would meditate 13 hours a day, have very little food, be in the middle of the forest, and all the rest of it. The whole thing is just an extremely challenging situation. But, people believe that if I put myself through all that, that'll get me there, that'll get me there. What he was sharing about it was he said that after going through that for some period of time, more than I could deal with, and I put up with a lot of stuff when it comes to these practices, and that's something that I would definitely not be able to deal with, and I don't think most people could. But he did because he was that committed, he was that sincere about waking up. And he said that after he went through that challenging experience, and while he was in that experience, he said he had all kinds of, mental, psychedelic experiences. He saw mandalas, he saw all kinds of things. And it could very easily lead somebody to believe that must mean I'm on my way. That must mean I've left being identified with the body and the person, and I'm now in the ethers, and I'm going to end up being the real deal. Well, what he said was that when he left there and was on his way to the airport to go home, by the time the taxi got to the airport, his personality had regrouped and completely taken back over. So he had not accomplished anything. The personality was just as strong as it always was. And so this is something that confounds people and confuses people, like, what's going on here? You know, I thought I was out of my personality, and then all of a sudden I'm back in it, and it seems like nothing's changed about it. I'm just as crazy as I was before. Well, the point he was trying to make there is that that's not what meditation is for. That's not what meditation is about. And so I think it's important to be clear about that. That meditation, the practice of meditation in and of itself, no matter how much you do it and how long you do it, is never, ever, ever going to transform you and have you become what you actually are. And the reason that that's the case is very, very obvious, even though it has to be overlooked for people to continue to do the meditation trip. And that is simply because you are already there. You are already that. And I know people who listen to what I'm saying and read the books and all the rest of it have heard that. So you hear that, and then you also hear, but meditate. It's so important to meditate. Well, the reason that that's the case, as far as I can tell, is that meditation is necessary in order to calm the mind and relax the body, right? So you don't have so much activity that keeps entraining you into the dream and training you into the belief that you are this body and you are this person. It's not going to change that just because the activity of that is reduced. It's not going to change that. But if the mind is calmer, meaning that there's less mental activity going on, less emotional upset going on, if that's calmed down, and if the body is relaxed so that you have more energy, right? Because you're not burning it up with tension and everything. If those two things happen, as Nitsujimi Roshi said, Brad Werner's guru, famous Zen master, and the way he talked about meditation, he said, the purpose of meditation is to bring the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system into balance. What did he mean by that? Well, the nervous system is out of balance because the aspect of the nervous system that prepares for the possibility of being attacked or killed, right, is overactive. It's working 24 hours a day, burning up a lot of your energy, right? Having you be in a fear-based existence, right? So that you're always like concerned about, you know, whether you're okay and whether somebody's threatening you and like that. And of course, since you identify yourself as a psychological personality, the threat doesn't have to be physical. It can just be a threat to who you think you are, and that's enough to make you kill. It really is enough to make you kill. So what he was trying to say is that if you bring the system into balance, if you bring the nervous system into balance so that you're not constantly in a state of hyperactivity, so you're not in a constant state of fear and tension and apprehension. If you do that, and you bring the mind to calm down, right, where the activity is reduced, so there's some opening there. There's an opening there instead of it being full of activity, and the body's relaxed now. Now, that is a more likely situation for you to recognize what's already true, because a lot of the distraction is now reduced, you see. So it's kind of like a window. You could say that the mind is like a window. And they talk about this in a lot of the Buddhist teachings when they say the big mind. The big mind, they mean awareness. The little mind's the mental state, right? But nonetheless, it's where things show up. It's where things show up, right? And so if you reduce a lot of this activity there, it's a lot more possible for there to be clarity, for you to recognize what is actual, what is true, and what is not true. So you could say that if you use meditation that way, so you don't have unrealistic expectations about it. So if you use meditation that way, and you understand what you're doing when you're meditating, right? And you're deepening your understanding about all this by studying the masters, by studying the teachings, right? Because to understand what's going on is important as it is to practice relaxing the body and calming the mind, to understand what's going on. All right, so one ways that you could talk about understanding what's going on is to say, well, what this is about is to have something a shift occur. And the shift, if the shift occurs, it will be that you are, instead of you're being a human being, right? You're being a human being. Instead of being a human being, you're being human. You flip it. So you're being human. In other words, you are the awareness expressing itself in a human life. You're being human, right? Instead of a human being, the humans first, and then you're being, right? So you have to get this back to the order that it needs to be in for it to be correct, right? Yeah, and if you start to experience what it's like to be human, then you know human is nothing other than the character you're playing in this game, in this drama that we're playing, you see. If the actor in a play or a movie, right? If the actor in a play or a movie didn't know they were an actor, right? Then they'd be stuck with the script. They'd be stuck with the script. They'd be stuck with the whole situation that they find themselves in, right? But because the actor knows they're acting, just like because you would know as when you woke up to your true nature, when you realize that you are awareness itself, you know you're acting as a human being, but you're not a human being. An actor is acting the script, acting the role, but all the while they know they're not actually the role, right? And this gives them leadway, right? Because the actor acting in a script can, while they're doing the act, right, they can stop and say to the director, maybe this script would go better, or maybe this character I'm playing, it would work better if we changed it, right? So you can do that because you know you're the actor. But if you thought you were the actual character, you can't do that. You're stuck in the script. This is exactly what it's like to be a human being. If you think that you're the character, which is like being the person, you can't change the script that you're in. You can't stop being the way you are as a personality. Even if you hate the way you are, you can't stop being the way you are because it's your conditioning, right? But if you now wake up and realize, oh, I'm the action figure, I'm the actor acting out that script, and now when you realize you're the actor acting out that script, this is what I was referring to earlier. You can willingly be the character knowing you're not. You can willingly be the character. You can willingly be an ego knowing you're not an ego. Now you can change the script because you know you're not the character, which means that when I choose to be the ego, I can operate within the ego knowing that I am acting as the ego, but I am not actually the ego. And while I watch the ego play and its conditioning, when the conditioning of the ego plays, what the conditioning is playing is that you are a separate self, and it's you against the world, right? Everything is a threat, right? All the rest of it, all right? That's what's playing when the ego is playing. But now I know I'm the actor playing the ego, and I can see that's not going to go well, and that's not. And so I'm going to modify the script. I'm going to stop playing that character that way. I'm going to start playing a character that's more godlike. I'm going to start playing a character whose life works. I'm going to start playing a character that has wisdom, that can see how to be in the world in a way that has my life work, right? And this is what they mean when they say wake up and then grow up. Wake up and then, do the work to bring yourself up to date, right? Update the programming, right? This is what we mean when we say neuro-enlightenment, right? Update the programming, change the brain, change the programming in the brain, right? It goes back to what Ramana Maharshi said, I'm paraphrasing this, so I don't know if it's exactly right, but I think I can get the point across. And one of the most famous statements that he made was that there is a presupposed non-existent self, a presupposed non-existent self. In other words, presuppose mean that the supposition's already occurred, right? Before you were born, the supposition was already occurred that you were going to be brought into the fold and become like the rest of us. Presupposed non-existent self, right? That's called the personality, right? So there is a presupposed non-existent self that seeks freedom for that non-existent self. If you can get that, that's the whole deal. That's the story, right? That who you think you are is trying to be free. Who you think you are is trying to become who you really are, right? But it's not necessary, because even who you think you are is who you really are, right? But it's wearing a mask. It's like it's been Halloween since the first birthday, right? You've been wearing a mask the whole time, and you don't know it's a mask. You think it's really your face. You see, it's like that, right? So the solution to the problem is not to think, oh, the personality's not real, I'm not the personality, awareness is the truth, I have to become the awareness. First of all, that's ridiculous. If I could snap my fingers and you would become the awareness right now, right? The only thing that would change is you would become deaf and dumb. That's the only thing that would change, right? Because how are you going to behave as the awareness? The awareness is not a doer. The awareness doesn't do anything. It's not an action figure. It has no personality, right? It has no form, right? So there's no way, there's no possibility of being the awareness in this life, in time and in space, right? That's why the awareness did what it did, to become a form, so it could be in life and experience the human life, right? It's not a problem, right? It's not a problem. It becomes a problem when that's the end of the story, you know? And like I say, that there is another chapter to this play that we're in here. There is a third chapter. The first chapter was that you were the unborn, you were the pure awareness. The second chapter is that you learned to be a personality, right? If it ends there, that's not the real end of the story, obviously, because some people have a third chapter, third scene in life. The third scene is to wake up and realize that you can't return to being the baby, okay? Being the personality and thinking that you were that and that was all there was as a separate self was a failure. It didn't work. Caused a lot of suffering, right? So what? So the next thing is you develop an understanding and begin to practice relaxing the mind and the body in such a way where you can have the third scene. The third scene is you realize, oh, I'm acting as if I am a body. I'm acting as if the story is real and true, but it's actually not real and true. And now I can experience the freedom that's available to me to play full out in the game of life. Why? Because when I awake, what I discover and what I realize is I can't lose this game. I can't be hurt in this game. Death isn't real. Time isn't real. Space isn't real, right? These are the understandings, right? And then if you want to get really all the way in with the understandings, right? Thy will be done. There's no doer. This is all a non-dual reality. This is all happening from the source. It's all happening from the source. If you can live in that experience, that's true freedom. That's true freedom. Because if you lived in the experience that everything is predetermined, that it's all coming from the source, right? Then that means that nothing that you've ever done that you're guilty about is true. Nothing that you've ever done that you feel shame about is true. That's all not true. You can let the whole thing go, right? The other thing is, it's not only the case that the source is producing what's happening for you, it's producing what's happening for everybody. Therefore, you can have no issue with any other human being, right? Because thy will be done, or the activity that's being produced by the source that's producing everything, So you can let go of personal guilt, personal shame, personal responsibility, and you can let go of having issues with anybody around you because they can't do anything to you, right? Because they're not the doer, just like you're not the doer. Nobody can do anything to you, right? So if you're going to live in truth, you have to let all that go. You have to let all that go. Now, you might be saying, wait a minute, if I let all that go, does that mean that I'm going to allow myself to be run over by other people? You know what I mean? Because I don't think that I have to defend myself. No. It means you can play full out. You can play the game now with full involvement, right? With the intention of realizing your true nature as a personality. This is what Jesus Christ was about. This is what the spiritual leaders were about. They were manifesting the source as a personality, right? Speaking as the source as a personality. But that doesn't mean that the personality then will consider that what's happening in time and space, right, in the world of form, right, will consider that to be something that you can just totally transcend and totally let go of. It doesn't matter at all. No, it matters more than it ever did now, right? Because you're free to play full out now. You're free to really take a position in life that is consistent with your true nature. And that may mean that you don't accept the ignorance. That may mean that you don't accept what people do that we call evil or I mean, if you think about it, if you look at it, all the things that are happening in the world that don't work are a function of ignorance. If people knew who they really were and if people knew what the truth was, could they kill each other? Because it would be clearly killing yourself. You couldn't do it. You couldn't have enemies, you know? You couldn't live in the world as if life is about just trying to control what's going on. That wouldn't matter to you anymore, right? All you would be interested in is sharing the truth with other people and experiencing the truth yourself. But that includes full play in the world, full play in the world. Right? So that's very paradoxical. So people get confused about that. That's one of the things that has to be worked through. You know what I mean? That's one of the things that has to be worked through. So once you have the conceptual understanding, then you do the practices to calm the mind and relax the body. That gives you some space, right? That gives you some clarity, right? Now you can begin to allow the real you to come out into the world through the personality. But in order for that to happen, you have to go through this process where you got to go through the confusion. Confusion and paradox are guardians of the truth. So you've got to go through the confusion, you've got to be patient, you've got to keep reducing the clutter in the mind, you have to keep reducing the tension in the body, you have to keep deepening your understanding of how things really work, right? And as you continue to do that, as the teachers tell us, you'll have openings where you'll see things clearly. You'll have openings where you'll experience everything is totally okay and totally workable. You'll experience that, but then you have to come back into the dream that everybody's experiencing and play your role in the drama. And because you're freed up from being totally identified with the characters you're playing, you can be creative. You can be creative. You can start behaving in ways that are not a function of your conditioning, but are a function of the truth, a function of what you know to be true, and you're expressing that in life because you understand that's what's going to get you what you always wanted. That freedom that Ramana Maharshi talked about, you know, the freedom that the presupposed non-existent self was trying to get for its non-existent self, it's discovered that that freedom has always been available, but you've been preoccupied with believing that this non-existent self is real and trying to get freedom for that non-existent self, which can never, ever happen. Never, ever happen. And the good news about all this is that the only real purpose and process of meditation and developing understandings, right, is to let go of the idea that anything needs to happen at all. To let go of the idea that you're not home. To let go of the idea that this isn't it. And when it's clear to you that that's the case and it's a conviction, right, then the next thing is, okay, start to live your life from that understanding and that conviction, no matter what the thoughts are, no matter how you feel. Keep giving your attention and energy to what's true and real, and in the end, that will win the day. And you'll still be a person, and you'll still have personal characteristics, you'll still have preferences, you still will not. And in fact, one of the things that I've discovered with this is you actually learn how to be in the world and represent the truth without compromising it. You learn how to be in the world and represent the truth without compromising it. So you don't just see the first thing that you might think, well, if I'm really who I really am, I'll just go along with everything. Right? I can go along with everything, right? Because nothing really affects me, right? Well, yeah, but if you're doing that, you're allowing what's going on that ignorance is producing, you're allowing that to continue to go on as if it doesn't matter, and it does matter. That's why Jesus Christ went nuts with the money changers, right? Because he wasn't going to allow himself to be present to what ignorance was producing and hurting people. That wouldn't be an expression of the truth. And so he acted accordingly, he acted accordingly. That's real freedom, the freedom to act consistent with the truth regardless of the consequences. Even if they're going to crucify you. And trust me, I've already been crucified a couple times. Once you've been crucified a couple of times, you realize it's not that bad. It seems that bad when it's happening, right? But it's a teaching. You realize that this is actually, if you're being crucified, it's probably because you expressed the truth somewhere where the truth can't be tolerated. That's probably why you're being crucified, right? But that's okay. That's okay. You don't take it personal, right? But you continue to operate that way in the world. And as situations occur to you as a personality, now it doesn't just get processed by your conditioning. Now it gets processed in relationship to the truth, right? And so that's what the ball is that you have your eye on. And that's what you keep trying to live consistent with, is that truth. And over time, that process gets easier and easier and easier, And if you get far enough along with it, you can do that in a very relaxed, interested, and exciting way. It's like an adventure that you're on. Okay, any questions? I dare you to have a question after. All right, see you next time.